Today, we're going to be talking about what application lifecycle security means. When we say full app lifecycle security, we're really talking about the inception of the application and the personas involved in delivery of that application. So think app developer, think the SOC, the cloud SOC, and then how to provide security for that application and come full circle and involve all of those personas and some ownership of the security of the application so we can provide the best protection both in a pre-production stage of that application through the production of life cycle of that application. We're going to apply some principles from AI. We're going to talk about cloud automation in pretty good depth. My name is Aidan Walden. I'm responsible for our cloud engineering and architecture efforts. My teammates are Julian Peterson, who is an certified offensive security professional, history as an SAP engineer. We just consider him a hacker. He's one of the best I've ever met. Shrija Alam is a senior or principal cloud security architect here at Fortinet. On our team, we do many things around cloud services and virtualization, but for today's conversation, I think the key point is we drive automation and DevOps into the security practice. So some of the things that we'll be talking about are really three key points that I want you to take away. The visibility of your applications and assets, which are key to doing other things. And from there, we look at automating SOC practices and workflows. There are a lot of reasons for that. I'm going to touch on what's driving us to provide this use case and this demonstration. And then using AI as a force multiplier, which is very, very important to being able to keep up with the signal in cloud. So we think this is going to be very interesting. So I'm going to start off setting a baseline on why this is important. And this is what we hear from the literally thousands of customers that we've had the opportunity to talk with. We know that customers are going through a continual cloud adoption process. And really, it involves understanding the people, process, tools, and then the data that you're trying to secure in order to make that cloud migration journey a successful one. But we never really start with the tools. We always start with understanding the organization, the personas involved, who we're working with, and who needs to be involved in the security workflows, and then helping customers to really overcome the hurdle of not having enough resources to deal with the signal velocity and volume. So there's so much signal coming out of cloud. You have multiple SIMs, you have multiple log sources and security features turned on across probably multiple clouds. So how do we deduplicate, provide context, and then make that actionable? That's really something our customers are after. And then finally, from all of that, we can drive an accurate view of the assets, the data in those cloud enclaves, and then provide policy consistency from that, right? So ultimately, the goal is we want to provide as much risk reduction, but within a lowest possible cost basis. And so some of the inhibitors that we run into that drive this use case that we're going to show today is we know customers have lots of different areas of their IT estate across a multi and hybrid cloud, but they don't have tools and processes that cover everything sufficiently or consistently. And when I talk to a lot of customers, I've talked to some customers who I said, hey, what kind of tools do you have? They say, literally, I have every tool possible. Business units buy tools. We try to build overlays on top of our tools. And so there are too many tools to manage. And so I think what we're hearing is that integration across these, different, maybe even best in class, best of breed tool sets creates a lot of problem and a lot of technology debt, right? And so from there, you have security operators who have alert backlogs that will never get resolved. They're not responding fast enough. And so the time to mitigate and remediate those threats, the dwell time is very long. And so we have to, we're challenged as a partner to our customers to overcome these issues. And we believe that good tooling with good integration across the ecosystem that the customer defines is paramount in that effort. And so we start with a baseline of understanding what the problems are. Customers are coming to us with, this idea that they are in the application delivery business. If you're going to cloud, you're probably in some mode of application delivery. Large enterprises are creating their own apps. I think it's common knowledge, but the number of application iterations and updates is a multiplier against the number of applications you have. And so the change management and keeping up with that from a policy perspective is very difficult. This is a key driver for implementing useful AI. I say useful because there's a lot of different claims to how AI is making security better, and we think it's all about efficacy. So when we work with our customers to improve their SOC practices, we try to understand, okay, what is the overall level of effort? How long is it taking you to identify a threat and remediate that threat? And typically we find 59 minutes out of every hour is used to just identify a threat. So you're spending basically all of your time just trying to figure out what you're trying to solve for. But when we implement integrations across the ecosystem, the vendor ecosystem, integrations across the different cloud capabilities and tool sets, and then we automate the touch points and decision-making points, and we provide context for the operators, we can literally take hours and turn that into minutes or seconds. So this is typically what we see from various time and motion studies, a 98% savings of total time against typical manual SOC efforts. So a couple of things that we're going to talk about today. So the three points of visibility, automating the SOC, and then using AI as a force multiplier are going to be really pegged against API security, because that is one of the two major challenges. Phishing is still probably number one. With respect to cloud specifically, API security is probably number one if you just take cloud in and of itself. The number one use case for cloud is web services. And then typically that interaction begins with an API. And so APIs that are publicly exposed into from networks that have multiple ingress and egress points and lots of east-west capabilities as apps are sprawled out across these growing cloud environments, that's very difficult to manage. And so API attacks are a particular area of focus for Fortinet, and a specific area of interest from our customers. And there's lots of documented attacks on those. And when those APIs are made publicly available, oftentimes there's no protection in front of those endpoints, and so we want to bring that to light and protect those. So how do we do that? So the traditional web application firewall approach was cumbersome and not very useful from a practical implementation perspective. So it has had to evolve. So during our demonstration, we're going to include some principles of the evolved web application and API protection approach. Our feature for that is based on what we call FortiWeb, and it supports 5 primary use cases at a high level: web application security, and bot defense, regulatory compliance, and then what we're going to talk about today, protecting internet-facing APIs, and then also we'll talk about SOC operations. Now, you'll notice under each of these headings that we call out machine learning. We've been evolving our machine learning capabilities for well over a decade, really as customer zero, to realize benefits on our side in order to respond to global threats faster. This is evolved into services that we make available on product to our customers. That's at this point very, very highly evolved, and really is a driver to making the SOC practice more efficient, removing false positives, and just generally lowering the overall level of effort and improving security baselines. So FortiWeb has multiple or 2 modules for machine learning, a two-stage machine learning process. But what we do with FortiWeb is, a developer can push code into a production environment. It goes through the pipeline. It gets pushed to production, where it is then ideally protected behind a web application and API protection mechanism. We would like it to be FortiWeb. And the customer is, of course, interacting with this application. Now, ideally, the application, the interactions from users to the application are used to train the model that protects it. As the FortiWeb service learns the schema from the API, it starts to narrow the security of that API specifically to that specific schema, and starts to differentiate between benign anomalies and malicious anomalies. A couple of points on the use case. We, with respect to protecting APIs, we have API gateway features that includes key verification, rate limiting, right, for denial of service attacks against an API potentially. We can protect that API by rewriting calls to it, and of course, supporting machine learning. Now, one of the components that we'll show that's very cloud native is the ingress control feature is part of this demonstration. So, whatever the application form factor, either service-oriented architecture or microservice, we have protections for those. The API feature, just a little bit more on that. So as the user is interacting with an API, or an application is interacting with the API, what we're doing is we're building the schema file for that API. Now, think about historically, in order to build a security policy that's very specific to an API endpoint, somebody has to document that. Typically, the application developer is taking cycles away from developing to documenting. And so that's a very labor-intensive process, takes hours or longer potentially. And what we're doing is we're doing that automatically. We're drilling into each API. We're evaluating the requests, the full request body, and then the response from the API. And from that, we're building a model. And then we have several modules within our machine learning engine that are training for that specific API. So as that schema and the parameters are being understood, that policy becomes very, very bespoke and specific to that particular endpoint. And so we can tighten security very, very tight to that API without interrupting or creating false positives or blocking users inadvertently, right? So that's the big challenge of trying to protect web services, is that users, there's a lot of false positives generated. Typically, the security practice will just turn off the rule and let everything through, and then we have an opening for an attacker. The other part, SOC operations. So this is about automating as much as we can, either through creating essentially automated playbooks that take action on behalf of the SOC, or create some contextual advisory for the SOC that allows them to make decisions more quickly, maybe understanding what the baseline is versus what they're seeing, and then also corroborating or correlating data and evidence from multiple applications. So, for an organization that has 100+ applications, as we mentioned earlier, being able to see what the attack profile looks like across all that entire footprint of applications, no matter where they exist, is a big benefit to the SOC. So now I can see if I have an advanced persistent threat, or if I'm a specific target. So what we're doing is creating locally significant threat intelligence that enriches the security view for the SOC operator. So this is about reducing noise and consolidating data. So for all the applications that come in, let's say there are web application firewalls, FortiWebs deployed in various versions, maybe virtual machines, maybe container instances, and maybe SaaS version of this or a hardware version in the data center, right? The form factor doesn't matter. We can consolidate that view of the entire security footprint for all web service interactions, and then we're creating that context and that analysis for the security operator. We can tell the security operator what not to look at, which is important, right? So we filter out the noise, and then we just show them what's important, and what IPs are consistently targeting you across your entire estate. Are there like escalation of attacks from one type to another that are correlated? So we can provide all of that into a historical and contextual view. Okay, so that's the API and SOC portion of web services. So what I want to touch on is the other part of our demonstration, which is really the automation bus behind the demonstration, the use case. So in cloud, we're asked to automate a lot of different processes across an entire organization, an entire workflow, or multiple workflows, right? So you have a lot of this happens, then what is the response action to that? And customers come with their own ecosystem. It's not 40 everything, as much as we would love that. It's maybe it's Fortinet and it's some other company's SIM or a competitor's firewall, or maybe a CI/CD process that needs to be involved. We can take all of that information and we can create automated use cases around that, right? So we want to provide alert triage automation, and we're going to demonstrate that. Threat intel management, so we can assess risk across in the entire ecosystem. So that really involves also building a view of the environment. I can create an asset inventory. I can understand where what metadata is describing those assets, and I can use that to my advantage. That's getting into best practices for asset classification from a security perspective. And then creating APIs. So there are dashboards that are important at a senior executive level. There are dashboards and KPIs that are important to the security operator. We can provide all of that so that the customer is aware of where their risk is relative to a baseline at any given time. But not only what the risk is, but what is the right problem to solve at that moment. So providing risk priority, which is really an underserved area of security overall, but we've been asked to solve for that. And then running multiple functions within a distributed SOC. So this is really in a statewide effort, creating an integration bus, if you will, across all of the different security services in the IT environment, and then connecting multiple teams. So this could be a distributed SOC, but it's really also as I mentioned before, the application developer working with the security operator, and then senior level stakeholders, the network operations center, and so forth. So a little bit more about this. This is a little bit on the alert triage automation. So what we're after is streamlined investigations. We're using AI in the platform itself to create priority for what should be detected. We're removing false positives and deduplicating information. So really making all of that overwhelming signal usable, right? I think that's a key point. And then providing a way to proactively respond. So in the demonstration today, we're going to proactively respond. And I'll go ahead and steal a little bit of what I think Julian was going to get into is in our demonstration today, we're going to be using a drone as an analog to an OT environment. We could not get a windmill for space and power reasons, but we have a drone. And so if you think about that drone as what may be a very critical infrastructure item or just an OT interaction, we're going to be showing that and how that can be attacked from an offensive perspective, and then how we would protect that proactively, right? With a very, very fast time to respond.
Sorry to interrupt, but I just want to validate something. Hearing all this is awesome, and I appreciate it. Will we also be able to see, kind of like the table stakes things, like where is this deployed, how is it being utilized, and like those type of things as well?
Yeah,
Architect,
we can.
I see head nodding, but I need an actual yes because the camera's not over there.
Yep.
Oh, okay. We can talk about where it's deployed. For our demonstration purposes, we typically deploy this in Azure. We also provide these services, many of them as SaaS. So whether it's the API, the web services and API protection of FortiWeb, and the SOAR capabilities, these can be consumed as SaaS services. What's interesting is the FortiWeb service can actually be consumed as a SaaS out of a customer's own data center. So if they feel like they want to have an OpEx-based deployment that's managed by Fortinet but run in their data center, that's also an option. So it's very flexible. So when we say where it's running in production practical purpose, it doesn't really matter. We can run it pretty much anywhere. But for our demonstrations, it's going to be in Azure.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that we're going to be able to see something like how it's deployed in architecture to where it should be deployed.
Oh, yeah.
I understand it could be deployed in different areas, but normally it's good to know like where it should be within the architecture and things like that. So that's what I'm trying to get at.
We have some diagrams, so Rich.
Fantastic.
Oh yeah, so we got in the drawing. Yeah, so we've got some architectural drawings that kind of show the layout, and then we can talk about where these are from a traffic flow perspective.
Got it.
Yep. Okay. So again, all of this is about simplifying the operations for the SOC practitioner. Look, scaling. Everybody talks about scale in cloud, and they talk about scale out, scale up of infrastructure. The biggest scale problem anybody ever has is scaling people. This is a people scale tool ultimately, right? And we're very, very good at Fortinet in scaling the security operations practice, acting as a force multiplier for people, and getting a strong return on investment through these automated functions. And so your total cost of ownership is down, your ability to respond is faster, and we're more targeted and more accurate on the threat hunt. We can reduce the risk baseline massively, right? And so that's what this is about, and this is what we're talking about here. So I'm going to leave you with this because I want to get onto the demo. But if there are, we're talking about visibility, automation of the SOC, and AI as a force multiplier in our demo today. From Fortinet in general, our ethos or mantra for cloud are really integration, right? Broad integration, deep integration across your different environments and your ecosystem, right? So you define your partner ecosystem. We work with those partners, and we can integrate with them natively. We want to operationalize data and signal. So most data and signal coming out of security operators is completely useless. We want to change that paradigm, and we do change that paradigm. And then finally, we're going to automate as much as possible. We want to scale the human resources that you have in an organization, and deliver positive outcomes for the goals that you've set for your organization for cloud.